without further ado, Mike Shedlock.
Thanks, JJ, and thank all of you for coming to this event. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be here in front of this. Looking back, we've got some of the brightest minds in the entire industry here in this room today. And looking back 8 years ago, I never thought that I would be here. In fact, I never thought I would be in the investment business at all. My background, as a few of you know, is actually in computer programming. I worked in computer programming for over 20 years. I've been through more bank mergers than any of you can possibly imagine. I was at Chase when Chase and Chemical merged. I was at the First National Bank of Chicago, who was bought out by First USA, who was bought out by Nations. I think it's now Chase. So following 9/11, I lost my job in the computer programming business. I couldn't get a job to save my life. The economy was booming, housing was booming, everything was going great seemed like for everyone but me. So, and I was, reflecting back, I was hanging out on stock message boards on Silicon Investor and the Motley Fool and places like that. And I'm here today actually because of a lot of luck. One of the posters on my board on the Motley Fool, on the Silicon Investor, was a guy named Bill McBride. He started the website known as Calculated Risk. Some of you might be familiar with that site. And, here I was, I'm, flat broke, out of money, no job for 3 years, and Bill McBride walks in and he says, hey, look at this is pretty cool. Google has these things out there and they're called blogs. We can start our blogs. I just started mine, and if anyone needs help starting their blog, I'll help you. And he goes, and best of all, it's free. Best of all, it's free. Well, that was a requirement of mine back there at the time. So anyway, he created the first template for my blog, and about 5 or 6 years later, Calculated Risk and I had the #1 and #2 economic blogs in the country. So I don't know what the odds of that are, but I also had some other help along the way. A guy named Heinz Blasnik, who I met on Silicon Investor, taught me everything I know about Austrian economics. And I ran into a guy named Steve Keen. He's one of Australia's top economists. He taught me a lot about debt deflation that I incorporated into a lot of my own theories on the inflation-deflation debate. I met Brian McCauley, the founder of Sitka Pacific, on Motley Fool website, and he encouraged me to take the Series 65 exam and become a registered investment advisor. So I did, and for a while things were going great at Sitka, at my blog. Life in general was great. Well, things changed for the worst about 3 years ago when my wife of 27 years came down with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And if you're not familiar with the disease, it's one in which the motor neurons just stop working. With Lou Gehrig, he went to swing a bat and found out he could no longer do it. The form that my wife had was called progressive bulbar palsy. And if any of you are in the medical industry, bulbar relates to the throat. And see, what we first noticed was a slight slurring of words. I thought she had a stroke, actually, but strokes don't get worse. And the slurring got worse and worse and worse. And eventually the diagnosis was ALS. You diagnose this disease, or they diagnose it after they've ruled out everything else. And her father had it and her grandfather had it. That's actually very unusual because it's generally thought of to not be genetically related, but in some cases it is, and I believe it was in ours. But anyway, she next lost movement in her arm, and she lost movement in her legs, and at the time of her death, she was quadriplegic. She couldn't move at all. I had to lift her up. Someone else had to help her go to the bathroom, put on her clothes, dress her, everything else. But when she could still communicate, we did so by means of a boogie board. She couldn't talk, but she would scribble these messages on a little board, or we had a computer where she could hit a key and it would speak out a phrase. I need to might be the start of it, and she'd press another key that would say go to the bathroom, or I need some food, or something like that. That's how we communicated. The entire time, her mental capacity was 100% operational, and she was courageous every step of the way. She never said, why me? Why me? And I couldn't have made it through this ordeal without two very close friends of my wife, Kathy and Mary Beth. And in the final year or so, Kathy gave up a year of her life, lived with us for an entire year, helped me take care of Joanne. I decided to give something back in life, and I thought the best way I could do that was to raise money through my blog. So I had this idea. I was going to sponsor this raffle, and people from 40 countries around the world actually bought raffle tickets or made donations. Some countries that a lot of people in the United States have never even heard of. I'll throw one out, Uzbekistan. I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing that properly. I raised about $250,000 through that. I was disappointed. The Les Turner ALS Foundation was thrilled with that amount, but I thought we could do better. So I said, well, how about holding an economic conference? And I called up John, my friend John Malden, and John said, Mish, do you know how hard that is? And, well, John, yes, I do. Thank you. Now, that's one of the things I learned here. I've always been a big fan of John Hussman, and he's one of the first people I called, and in a moment of temporary insanity, or perhaps it's charity related, John said yes. And once we had John on, John Malden said, well, my gosh, if John Hussman's coming there, count me, and I'm in too. Michael Pettis hopped on board from China, and we actually have an attendee here from Europe and then one from Brazil. So this is an international conference, and with some really bright speakers. Michael Pettis taught me nearly everything I know about trade. And so here we are. We've got John Hussman, John Malden, Chris Martinson, Jim Chanos, Michael Pettis. Two of the foremost experts on China are here. We have Lauren Lister from Yahoo Finance here. We've got some coverage from MarketWatch. Net proceeds go to the Les Turner ALS Foundation, and this was all made possible by a $100,000 matching grant from the John Hussman Foundation. So give a big round of applause here for John Hussman.